ESPN front office insider Phil Savage joins us here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Phil, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Hope you're well.
We are doing well, and it's ironic that the day Carson Wentz throws, there's some murmurs out there from at least one NFL executive, whoever these guys may be sometimes, that think the Eagles, where we carry Eagles football here, we're the home of the Eagles, would have interest in moving up for him, even after they've already signed two quarterbacks to a lot of money.
Yeah, I've absolutely made the case in some of my other interviews that I would not be surprised if one of these two quarterbacks, either Carson Wentz or Jared Goff, was available to the Eagles at pick number 8, or if one of them is still on the board at pick 5 or 6. I could see them making a move and then dumping Sam Bradford to another team. They've got their bridge to the future in Chase Daniel under contract. I thought the idea of paying him $7 million a year indicated that they would be willing to play him and move away from Bradford if, in fact, a quarterback presented itself or they aggressively went and got one. And, after today's workout with Carson Wentz, in all honesty, this is sort of the culmination of his pre-draft work. He was in the Reese's Senior Bowl. He performed well there, then at the Combine, and now his pro day. I think the Tennessee Titans, if they weren't open for business before, I think they may actually have a few customers now.
And Phil, when you look at Wentz, and I know today he threw, of the quarterbacks, where do you rank him on that list?
Well, this year's class, I think he's the best one because for a couple of different reasons. Number one, he's the biggest. He's 6'5", he's 237 pounds. He's played in more of a traditional style of offense. He's got some escapability, some mobility. His ball placement, his accuracy is good, especially short and intermediate. But in terms of my own exposure to Carson down in Mobile, the thing that was really impressive about him is the fact that on a roster full of players from Ohio State, Michigan State, much larger schools, higher profile programs, he really took the mantle of leadership, and it wasn't in a phony sort of created way. It was legitimate. And so I think when you roll all those things together, to me, he's the rookie quarterback that would have the best chance to get on the field this year.
Phil Savage with us at Senior Bowl Phil is his Twitter handle. And you mentioned Ohio State for a second there, Phil. Ezekiel Elliott is a name that we've heard out here is having the Eagles possibly having interest in. What's your take on Ezekiel Elliott? Is that somebody that you think the Eagles could go after?
Yeah, I think he's definitely on the radar. You don't make that move to go from 13 to 8 unless you have some real legitimate targets in place in terms of there's got to be at least 2 or 3 players that they really like and they think will be available in that 5, 6, 7, 8 range. And, I will tell you this, most of these mock drafts have Carson Wentz going to the Browns at 2 and then Jared Goff going to the 49ers at 7. I think if you connect the dots, you don't think the Eagles would love to jump in front of the 49ers and Chip Kelly and grab a quarterback that they may be sitting on. So, I think the Eagles are going to be a player on draft day. Ezekiel Elliott at choice number 8 would definitely make some sense for them. I mean, he's really a talented player. It's just a matter of, do you have the philosophy in mind that you're willing to take a running back in the top 10 of the draft? Typically, running backs are only one contract players. And when you usually use a pick in the top 10, you're hoping to get 2 contracts, 8, 9, perhaps 10 years or more out of that particular prospect.
Phil Savage with us, former NFL GM. I want to ask you, from your perspective with that position, how do you look at the job that Howie Roseman has done as the pseudo GM for the Eagles here in his second go-around? I guess nobody knows what his title is at this point, but I guess he's the de facto GM.
Yeah, there's no question his fingerprints are all over the moves that have been made in this spring. I think if the goal was to sort of clear the deck and move away from the last two years, or especially last off season, I think they've done a good job. They're in position. with a new coach and Doug Peterson, a new defensive coordinator, and Jim Schwartz, to sort of push the reset button without having to start all the way over. I mean, the Eagles are not devoid of talent. They have some good players there. I think the feeling inside that organization is that, hey, our team and our record is not indicative of what we think we have on hand here. So with all that being said, the NFC East is really up for grabs. There's no team that's clearly better than everyone else in those four programs. So when you look at it that way, I think the Eagles feel like they'll be able to contend as soon as this year.
Phil, the other day, Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie talked, and that was a real interesting conversation as he spun the idea that, they sent Howie Roseman. He was spanning the globe. They sent him to all these different sports to learn more about being a player personnel guy, and that got me to thinking, what do you think the rest of the league, how do they view Jeffrey Lurie, and how do they view the Eagles organization when comments like that are made?
Well, I think that, you're going to have those public statements made to sort of protect the organization. I don't know that we'll ever know the true ins and outs of what went down there, other than the fact that, they really aggressively pursued Chip Kelly. He got there. I don't think he was overly impressed with the way things were being done in personnel. And so he says he didn't ask for control, but he certainly got it. And I think because of that, Howie was left in a position where he was not going to make much of an impact in 2015. So he took that time to go do some research and try to improve himself and really take a step back and say, if I get another crack at this, which may happen, and it could happen here in Philadelphia, I'll be better prepared for it the next time around. So I think there's some validity to what Mr. Lurie said, but at the same time, you framed the question by saying spin. I think there's a lot of that goes on.
Phil Savage is with us, ESPN NFL front office insider, as the senior vice president GM of the Browns, also director of college scouting for the Baltimore Ravens, Super Bowl roster that he helped put together there. And you mentioned that the Eagles are not devoid of talent there. At this spot for them at number 8, are there spots at that level of the draft that you don't draft? I mean, they need interior guard play. Do you draft a guard at number 8? What are positions at number 8 that you can legitimately look at, and what are some positions that you just say, look, it's too early in the draft whether you need it or not?
Yeah, Mike, that's a great question. I think the reality of it is that you're looking for players that can make a difference, the guys that can close out a game with either a pass rusher or a pass defender, someone that's clearly going to be on the field, 3 downs, first, second, third down, can impact the game not only against the run but certainly against the pass as well. I don't see that, there's plenty of interior linemen that will be available in the second, third, and fourth round. This is actually a pretty good draft for those kinds of prospects. So I would say that there's, zero chance they would take an inside lineman. They would probably stay away from, a defensive tackle at that point because, again, there's great depth in this draft at that position. They've got Fletcher Cox in place. So with that being said, I think, they're trying to find somebody that can score touchdowns or prevent touchdowns from being scored on them. And, I don't – a corner, maybe. Again, you're looking at Jalen Ramsey, who's probably be off the board from Florida State. Vernon Hargreaves at pick number 8. He's a really talented individual, but he's not the biggest corner out there. And so when you think about having to defend against Dez Bryant and, some of the guys that they face on an annual basis, I think that would be at least a consideration for him. But again, he's only about 5'10", 5'11".
Phil Savage with us. We told you ESPN front office insider with the former GM of the Browns. I've got to ask you this question as we let you run here. Tom Gamble was here. He was kind of Kelly's guy, and then he gets fired. No one can really explain what the heck happened. But if that never happens, do you think the mess that occurred in the Philadelphia front office happens? I mean, they're talking about a go-between where Kelly's picking players and Roseman's doing. Have you ever heard of such a mess in the front office? And do you think that Gamble being fired was the start of all this?
It certainly was part of the equation. I think Tom, had a lot of experience and, was but could have been a more experienced go-between, perhaps. I've known Ed Manowitz for quite some time. He was at Alabama. I do the color for Alabama's radio broadcast. He's a very talented personnel man, but had not been in that kind of role. I'm not sure that many people have been in a role where you're, taking instructions from the head coach and then going down the hallway and say, hey, these are the players that we'd like to get, what have you. These are the contracts that we want. It doesn't seem like there was a lot of people being on the same page there. And so when you have that in a very competitive league, you end up in this type of situation. It's hard enough to win, Mike, when everybody's pulling in the same direction. It's pretty obvious that, it was a fragmented building from at least 13, 14 months ago.
Phil Savage here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. 20 years of NFL front office experience. You now see him all over the NFL front office insider platforms for ESPN. The Senior Bowl as well, of course, and the NFL Draft. Great stuff from Phil Savage here on the Sports Bash. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, Mike. Have a great weekend. I appreciate it. Thank you.